Hey guys, Ponce here, and Riot has released some information on Alphelios' kit, so I'm here to explain what the hell's going on, because it's kind of weird and complicated. But before we get into that exactly, just to be clear, he is not currently on the PB. As you can see, here's my PBE account. I don't know when it's going down. It's either later today or tomorrow, which we'll see which, but stay tuned to the channel here on YouTube, or twitch.tv/Ponce, which is, link available in the description below for live gameplay when that happens. But yeah, as soon as he's available, I will get that stuff up for you guys. Either again live on Twitch or kind of the more finished recorded content that we push over here. All right, so in any case, getting right into his kit, he is an AD carry. Just to get that out of the way, he's like a ranged marksman, or whatever the hell Riot wants to call it. But anyway, very strange kit. Let's go over the basics here before we go into, well, obviously more specifics in terms of what the abilities actually do. But in terms of his like raw shtick, his gimmick, he's got a main hand weapon and he's got an offhand weapon. In total, he has 6 weapons which he cycles through. His main hand weapon is his basic abilities will correspond to his main hand, and he'll auto attack with the main hand. The offhand is there for basically proc effects, essentially. Like, it will modify what your main hand is doing, but you don't actually really shoot with the offhand typically. Now, each weapon has... Actually, you know what? Let's scroll down. Riot really should have probably put this picture up top because it's a good visual in terms of what's actually going on here. But yeah, here's his main hand. You see, and they both main hand and offhand have 50 ammo. So once you run out of ammo with your main hand, you will swap to the next weapon, which is shown right here, number 5 on the list. And behind this, there are 3 more weapons because he's got 6 weapons, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so yeah, 6. So when this weapon here, the main hand, runs out, it goes to the end of the line back here. It looks like you can't actually see what his extra abilities or where his extra weapons are beyond the next one, but I imagine there's probably some kind of set order, which we'll find out eventually. So it goes to the end of the line, and that swaps in. At any point, you can swap your main hand with your offhand, like that. So if you, for example, I'll give you an example here. Let's say you don't like your offhand. You think it sucks, or, Riot didn't do a very good job of balancing, and the offhand is really terrible, or this specific weapon is really terrible. You can swap it to your main hand, just burn the ammo, and then get rid of it and put it to the end of the line. Seems like a pretty realistic scenario we'll be dealing with. But in any case, yeah, so again, just to be clear, there are 2 kinds of weapon swapping. There is pressing W and switching your main hand with your offhand, or there is running out of ammo on your main hand, and the main hand goes to the end of the line to, recharge or refill its ammo or whatever, reload, and then the next weapon comes in and swaps into your main hand. So you can kind of get creative in terms of mixing and matching your main hand and your offhand and which you want to go to the end of the line. So there we have that. Now his abilities as we move on, hopefully that was a bit clear. Oh, by the way, this article is available in the description below, so if you didn't like the way I explained it and you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about and you think Riot did a better job, feel free to read the article at your leisure and you can figure stuff out. In any case, moving on to his abilities. His abilities are also weird because he only has a Q, a kind of W, which we talked about. That just swaps things. But yeah, his ability is a Q. He has no E whatsoever. It doesn't exist as a button as far as I can tell. And his ult. Now his Q changes based on his main hand weapon. So ult, in the grand scheme of things, you're not really lacking in abilities. It's just any given time, you really only have one ability to use. But yeah, the Q is dependent on your main hand weapon and will be modified to an extent by your offhand weapon. It doesn't change with the ability, like the exact ability, but it'll do slightly different things based on what your offhand is, usually. But we'll get into that later. And of course he has his ult. Now his ult, I'll just read the Riot blurb about what it does here. But Alphelios' ultimate Moonlight Vigil sends forward a moon bomb that explodes on the first enemy hit, damaging nearby enemies. Then Alphelios follows up with enhanced basic attacks from his main hand weapon against all enemies caught in the explosion. He automatically learns his ult at level 6, and it automatically levels up at level 11 and 16. Oh, incident, I probably should have mentioned, his Q also automatically levels at level 2. Or rather, you automatically get it, and it seems like it auto-levels. So you don't actually spec any points in his abilities. So what do you spec points into? Stats, apparently. You can, on level up, you can either put stat points into attack damage, attack speed, or bonus armor pen. So that has some interesting implications about what his how his scaling is. We'll see what his numbers are like. Like, there's really no way to comment on this beyond having played it, or unless you've played it. So yeah, let's go on to what his actual weapons are. As I said, he's got 6. So let's start off with Calibrum, the rifle, so his basic long-range pokey thing. Yeah, even Wright says it's his basic poke harass weapon. Basic attacks have extra range. When you damage, and again, I'm not going to read this exactly, I'm just going to kind of summarize things, but you mark enemies, and then you can kind of right-click on them, and then you'll shoot them with your offhand from anywhere. So that's kind of the interaction there with that weapon. But it seems pretty basic. It seems kind of like the, you know, your laning, poking, I'm playing Caitlyn style weapon. Its Q is just kind of a basic skill shot that marks enemies. And yeah, your Moonlight Alt Vigil thing just does a bit more damage when you blow up marks and stuff. So pretty basic. Again, if you want to, you know, more exhaustive detail, look at the article. I'm not here to do a 10, well, probably like a 20-minute video. But anyway, next we have Severum, the Scythe Pistol. Severum is a sustained weapon that heals Alphelios for a portion of the damage it deals. Overhealing from Severum is converted into small shield. A small shield. So this is probably the thing, you know, in lane you want to swap to, and then you shoot some minions with and you get some health back. I don't know the in-game utility of it, or rather the actual champion PvP utility of it. It all depends on the numbers, which I can't obviously comment on. But Severum, his Q, it's probably easier for me to read it again, so I'm reading, but whatever. Gain momentum speed, movement speed, and rapidly fire your main hand and offhand weapon at the nearest enemy, prioritizing champions. Onslaught shots behave like basic attacks, but deal reduced damage. So this is probably kind of like your all-in thing. If you're, you know, for short range, if you're caught with this weapon out, you're best off with maybe some kind of offhand weapon that either deals lots of damage or has some kind of utility, much like the thing that's going to come up here. Oh, and his ult just gives him a heal if he has the pistol out as his main hand. Okay, so this is kind of, yeah, it seems, I don't know exactly what the deal is. It depends on the weapon's damage and range. It looks like it would have long range, but I imagine shorter than the Calibrum, if I had to guess. But yeah, Gravitum is a utility weapon that applies a decaying slow on enemies. His Q is also a bit different in that damage and root all enemies on the map affected by Gravitum Slow. So you basically auto-attack them, and then you press this button, and then they get rooted. But it does not interact with any kind of offhand weapon whatsoever. It doesn't say anything, however, about it being in the offhand and then being able to use it. For example, I'm guessing you can still use it as the offhand, otherwise it kind of like screws with other weapons too much, it seems like. So you could probably use Severum, the pistol's Q, to just go apeshit on people, and then have the Gravitum also firing and slowing people, if I had to guess. And Moonlight Vigil's follow-up attacks apply a massively increased slow, so extra slowing. So Infernum, the Flamethrower. So this is kind of like an AoE cone weapon. So I guess the closest thing in the game would be Graves' shotgun, something like that. The Q is sprout a wave of flame, damaging enemies. Then basic attack, all enemies hit with your offhand weapon. So this one's pretty basic. It just looks like it just puts out a cone of damage, and then you shoot with your offhand. So there's that. And the ult is Moonlight Vigil's follow-up attack creates a damage circle around enemies hit instead of a damage cone behind them. So basically it looks like if you get a whole bunch of enemies clustered and you have the Flamethrower out, you press your ult and they all just start damaging each other. Seems like a pretty good, yeah, big AoE team fight use of the ult. And this is probably the most unusual weapon here. The Crescendo, I guess it is. The Chakram. So this is a bit weird, so I'm just actually going to read the full thing. It is supposed to be trying to like explain what's going on, but anyway, Crescendo, whatever, is a close range DPS weapon that behaves like a boomerang. Once Alphelios basic attacks with Crescendo, he can't attack again until it returns to him, but his attack resets when it does. Attack speed increases Crescendo's travel speed instead. The closer Alphelios is to his target, the less distance Crescendo has to travel, and the faster Alphelios can attack. When abilities or their follow-up attacks deal damage with Crescendo, they create temporary copy. I'm going to go with Crescendo. I changed my mind. Temporary copies of it for each enemy hit that increase the strength of Crescendo's basic attacks. So I don't know if there's an equivalent in terms of auto attacks in the game currently. I guess it would be a little bit like REQ, and then when she gets her back, she gets to press her Q immediately again, kind of thing. It's basically a close range weapon. So the further away your target is, the crappier your DPS gets. Now, presumably this character, he's an AD carry. He doesn't want to be at close range, but, in those oh shit situations, someone jumps on you or something, he's like, I need as much DPS as possible. You got this in your offhand, you swap to it, and then you just start throwing these out at really close range for maximum possible damage. I imagine is the idea. So the Q is the sentry. Deploy a turret that shoots the nearest target with your offhand weapon. So, for example, let's say you have your gravitum, I guess, in the offhand. You put that down, you make that a sentry, it starts slowing people. You just dance outside of like their melee range or whatever for maximum damage. Possibly uses like that. We'll see. And the Moonlight Vigil effect is if Moonlight Vigil hits fewer than 3 enemies, its follow-up attack still increase the damage of Crescendo's basic attacks as if at least 3 enemies were hit. Okay. So yeah, I showed this picture here explaining what the HUD is. Again, let's go over this really quickly. I'll go to the important stuff, like this is whatever, but for example, so this is your main hand here on the 2. The 3 is what your Q is. Your 4 is your offhand. Note, again, it shows your ammo down there. 5 is the weapon that's coming up. 6 is your alt. Note the lack of presence of any E. All right, well then, I guess we should maybe go over some implications of this character. I think it's a nice idea that Riot's doing something complicated. It's definitely different. Riot is not, necessarily known for doing super different things in League of Legends. They do things a lot that kind of seem different on the surface, but aren't massively different. I could see, I think this is definitely going in the direction of it's quite different. Again, there is some of the probably that surface level, it looks a lot more different than it actually is. Unfortunately for me, it's an AD carry. Not my favorite role, but if you like AD carries, I can see it being an interesting thing. For me personally, it kind of feels like it's wasted potential for someone with like a whole variety of melee weapons. And you have a melee weapon swap character depending on the situation and the context. But, maybe they'll do that eventually if this kid is successful. We'll see. For me, what is concerning is the total lack of mobility. And I realize, not everyone can, benefit from the mobility creep in the game. And not everyone's meant to be flying around the map with globals that teleport them everywhere and just sudden gap closes everywhere. But to me personally, mobility has always been such an important thing in terms of basically applying your agency on the game. It allows you to kind of dictate things happening as opposed to allowing other people to let things happen. Allows you to do more risky things and kind of stand out in crazy positions and maybe dictate what's going to happen on the map a bit more. So this looks like it's going to be in how it overall plays, not how it like actually plays in the moment. A bit more traditional AD carry-ish, where I guess you got to kind of sit back a bit and let things happen a little bit more. Don't take quite as many risks. Work with your support, all that kind of stuff. So we'll see how that works out. Again, it depends largely on the numbers. I mean, if your numbers are so stupid, yeah, you can stand out in front of your team and solo the entire, 5 enemies at once, theoretically. But I doubt it's going to be that bad. Although, speaking from a balanced perspective, usually when characters are super weird like this, and there's another article floating around somewhere talking about how this is supposed to be like a very high skill cap character, or like the highest skill cap character, something like that. Usually Riot tends to they tend to overtune characters very early in that case, and then they'll nerf them down as people get used to them. So we'll see where all that's at. But I expect some pretty high numbers, most likely. They'll be way too low. It's usually kind of one or the other. But in any case, now Riot says high skill cap. From a mechanical perspective, it's more so just weird. I think once you wrap your head around this, obviously I haven't played this, but it doesn't seem too hard to manage in terms of just swapping weapons. I think the skill that Riot is talking about here is very, very long-term planning and managing what weapon is going to come in and then how to pair it with certain weapons and basically foreseeing certain scenarios and what is on the enemy's team and how to best deal with them in terms of your offhand procs and something like that. Because in the moment, like, there's not a lot you can do about bad situations. If you, for example, you're just locked into 2 weapons at the time, right? So you can't expend all your ammo all of a sudden, as far as I'm aware. So just kind of thinking way ahead and doing that sort of the mental math, saying, okay, if I use all this ammo here, and then this weapon is cycling in next, and I want to get the ammo on the offhand down to about this point so I can quickly swap for exactly this combo, because there's most likely going to be a team fight at Dragon in 3 minutes kind of thing. Yeah, I can see that being pretty complicated, and you'd probably take a while to actually get used to that kind of thing. Again, it also depends on like whether or not the weapon cycling is set. I don't know if it is or not. I imagine it is. There's probably a very specific order, and then that gets, you know, jostled with and messed around depending on how you swap weapons in and out. But if I had to guess, it's probably set. I don't know if they show you what's coming up somewhere on the HUD. As far as I can tell, they don't. If they don't, I feel like they'll add that, but we'll see. That just seems kind of annoying if they don't. Another point to note is this is another weird character in the bottom lane that your support is really going to have to know how to work with, and they're going to have to know the character very well. Obviously, you know, supports and AD carries need to know what their partner does exactly. This seems like, again, another more extreme version of that. A little bit like how Yuumi, you know, like the 2 bottom laners really had to know what was going on with Yumi's kit to function with her. It seems sort of like the inverse of that, so it's the AD carry and what he's doing with his weapons, and it's really weird and might require some communication with solo queue people. But we'll see. It is an interesting idea. As far as AD carries go, I think this is about as interesting as they can make it. For me, I wish it just had some mobility personally. So that on its own can really be a lot of time be a make or break it deal for me, again, personally. So it has nothing to do with probably a lot of you guys. But yeah, on that note, I guess we can end things off with the quick Riot trailer for what this character, I don't know, looks like. But that's going to be it for me. Again, look forward to seeing you guys on the PB. This probably ended up being a really long video, didn't it? Like I was talking about. I don't want this to be a 20-minute video. It might have been. I don't actually know how long it was. Anyway, see you guys on the PBE, either here on YouTube or twitch.tv/Ponce. Thanks for watching. Oh, I can get rid of myself here.
Alphelios, the deadliest is